Greetings, ICSSP. I'm Tim McKenzie. My supervisors and I are from the University of Canterbury here in New Zealand, and I'm here to talk to you today about how Agile is used and misused in the video game development industry. So fun fact, video game development is the largest entertainment industry in the world, with more than music and movies combined. A third of humanity are gamers. Less fun fact, less than 4% of games that go in production are successful. Why? Well, the most recent research says it's people. Multidisciplinary project management and team dynamics are common issues in game development, yet most studios say that they're agile. So it begs the question as to why studios who say they're using collaboration-based frameworks are having collaboration problems. And so the problem space is around the relationship between how game studios perceive agile, their actual development practices, and then the challenges that they're consequently facing. That leads us to our research question. Well, what are the reasons for how and why studios adhere or do not adhere to agile frameworks such as Scrum and Kanban in their own development context? Now, to investigate this, we use semi-structured interviews with 8 New Zealand studios, representing about half the New Zealand's population of game developers. We asked them 9 questions around their development methodology for about 40 minutes, and we use the general inductive approach to qualitatively analyze the results using Navivo. The general inductive approach generated about 5 key themes relating to Agile and game development, the first one being Agile game development frameworks. Now, you can see from this word cloud of the most common words that were generated during the interviews, it certainly sounds Agile with moving, acts, change, actively. Agile appears very suitable for game development for its flexible and iterative and experimental nature. Scrum is often used to program game features through a structured feedback cycle and for producing post-release content periodically. Kanban, mostly used for artists and other continuous production of assets such as sound and music. But how Scrum and Kanban are adapted in game development will now be explained. One of the most obvious ways Scrum is adapted is through the roles. So the product owner in game development becomes the project manager or game designer who still controls the game's vision, but the ordering of the backlog is often done by the producer, who's also a kind of hybrid role between the product owner and the Scrum Master because they're also doing their best to support the team. Now the team themselves are sort of more diverse and specialized. So for example, artists make art assets, audio engineers make audio assets, and so on, where game programmers are the ones making the game features. A team lead is also another kind of hybrid role that is supporting the team like the Scrum Master, but also ensuring that the work is done. Now, in this configuration, the leadership functions is more mixed across the roles, and yet at the same time, the process tends to be more directed than traditional Scrum, and the teams are more diverse, specialized, and sort of tend towards natural silos. So you can see where some of these people challenges are beginning to emerge in this arrangement. So this is a model of the video game development process and the different phases that are involved in the development of a game, along with the different delivery milestones or deliverables that are worked towards in each phase, along with a 2-track delivery system for assets and features. And it's these 3 factors that constrain how Scrum and Kanban are used in video game development. So the concept phase is very experimental and open. It's all about discovering what the game could be. And so Scrum and Kanban are used in a very loose way just to rapidly iterate on game ideas to figure out what might work. Then you enter pre-production where you're creating the game tools in order to make the assets that you need, as well as testing out these prototypes. And the Kanban pipeline is used to create some of the assets for the game. In production, the levels of the game are in full swing along with feature creation, and Kanban is often used for continually making more assets and for quality control and play testing the game. The game division is getting more defined at this point, and so the use of Scrum and Kanban begin to resemble what we might traditionally define them as, until we reach post-production when the game's been released out to the wild and you're receiving a lot of bug reports. So a lot of it is about rapidly responding to that using Kanban, as well as iteratively producing additional content for the game. Scrum and Kanban are shaped to meet the different delivery milestones. So for instance, during the concept phase, a sprint might only be a week long, before there's a review, where in production, when there's a whole increment of the game being produced and integrated, there might be 3 months before there's a review of the game and the work. Another key theme that came out with the use of Agile in game development is the challenges thereof, in terms of how Agile is often misunderstood and misapplied. For instance, a lot of studios reported a lack of training of game developers in Agile methods. And so when a studio introduces Agile, there's often a lot of bias against changing from their current processes to this unknown process. And it's often misapplied in ways like Scrum But, where it's only a partial implementation of Scrum, or Scrum Fall, where it's a mixture of Scrum and Waterfall, or even Cargo Cult Scrum, which is an anti-pattern where Scrum is applied very rigidly by the book without any flexibility or understanding of the reasoning behind the processes. And so they end up having many collaboration challenges, such as team communication and accountability, which they then blame on Scrum or Agile because they've misunderstood them, because they've misapplied them. And so there's a bitter aftertaste for a lot of developers around Agile and hostility towards it. To illustrate the point, here's a table of how studios adapted their practices around retrospectives in terms of the team size, whether they use retrospective, action points, Scrum Masters, and the team dynamics issues that they're facing. What I want you to see is that those studios who followed the Scrum definitions for team sizes, retrospectives, and Scrum Masters actually reported no communication or accountability issues. Whereas those studios who did not use these practices actually had the most apparent communication and accountability problems. Now, no studio was problem-free, Agile or otherwise. Process commitment, shared understanding, and knowledge siloing was a more stubborn problem across the board. But the key point here is that the most Agile-aligned studios had less of the reported collaboration problems. To recap, the goal of this study was to explore the relationship between how game studios adapt Agile frameworks and the development challenges that they face in collaboration. The first finding was that Agile frameworks must be adapted to meet the multidisciplinary, creative, and engineering needs of game development. However, they do benefit collaboration in teams when they are properly understood and applied. Many studios say that they're Agile when they're in fact not. However, Agile frameworks currently are insufficient to meet all the needs of game development, and so Agile is only part of the solution. A Agile and creative production hybrid development framework seems to be needed. For those fact checkers out there playing at home, here are the references for the data I used on my slides. And here are the contact details for myself and my supervisors. We're all based here at the University of Canterbury and would all be excited to hear your comments, suggestions, or questions about this study. Thank you very much for listening.
Then we are live from New Zealand, and it's evening down there. Good to see you, Tim. While people are preparing their questions, I'll start with mine. You describe 4 phases of video game development. That I found that very interesting. And then you also claim that the most ideas don't make it. So where are they stopped in these 4 phases? And could you elaborate a bit on why you have 4 phases?
Sure. There's no shared vocabulary with game developers. So the 4 phases is what I discovered interviewing New Zealand studios. So depending on what developer you're talking to, some might not even break it down to phases, but these terms are borrowed from the film industry. So the whole pre-production, production, post-production. So in terms of project failure, some projects start in pre-production but never even make it to the production phase. So pre-production being your design phase where you're testing out different ideas and things like that, and they might find that the game's just not feasible, and so they don't release it. Others try to go into production and they keep working, but they might feature creep where they keep adding in new elements and they overrun their schedule and their game never gets released. Or the few games that do get to market that are in post-production, that production's finished, may bomb because either they didn't have a good marketing campaign or they just make a successful game.
Okay. Good, interesting. Then I wonder, why did they actually apply Agile, these companies?
Sure. A lot of them got on the Agile bandwagon in the early 2000s. A lot of them come from a software engineering background, and then Agile is very much the buzzword in that domain. But in terms of practical value, game development is very much about experimentation. trying out different prototypes, getting feedback, incremental development, layer upon layer, and sort of iteration, and getting that feedback cycle with players and your client. And so sort of agile principles and structures, actually, a lot of it does sync with game development, but not everything.
Okay, interesting. We have a question from Filippo. Did someone mention problems with continuous integration? For example, applying version control systems to multimedia?
Sure. Some studios, you're lucky if you even had continuous integration, but certainly integration of multimedia assets is a challenge. So one of the main ones being a lot of studios use the Unreal engine, which is a sort of integrated development tool specifically for making games. It's optimized for game development. And these use blueprint systems, which means that a lot of the files are actually in binary. And trying to merge these files together and integrate them is nearly impossible. And so you need good processes to alleviate that. So you wouldn't want to have two different developers on two branches working on the same prefab or scene that's in Unreal. You want processes so they're working on separate elements. So that is definitely a challenge for a lot of studios. And that was something that did come up in the interviews.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Back to the phases then. Ita asks, are there statistics for the stages for where the non-successful project actually happens? I'm amazed by the 4% statistics.
It is surprisingly hard to get, it's a good question, to get solid statistics on game development. It's a pretty nebulous industry. A lot of it you have to either infer from official media releases or an example. So Steam is a online distributor of games. You upload it and they distribute it and market it for you. And this is a company owned by Valve, and they periodically release statistics on that. And analysts have looked at it, and they've gotten some recent data on the trends in terms of successes and money made by games. And I think only less than 1% even make it over $250,000 in terms of profit coming back, and I think it's US dollars. So that means the vast majority aren't even breaking even on making the game.
Okay, interesting. I guess there's possibilities for future research there. We have to stop there, but it's possible to just hang on in this room if anyone wants to join. Please do that. Then we're ready for the final presentation, final video by Durek Toncha, about agile transformation and a framework for that.